In this video, I'm going to talk about how you could use CrossFit for sports performance. I'll talk about the pros, the cons. I'll give you an example workout and then 2 different adjustments of how I would change it for 2 different types of athletes. What you're about to watch is video 1 of a 2-part series in our educational platform, The Classroom. If you want to see part 2, where I break down how to take these concepts, make movement manipulations, and understand how to individualize training for athletes, check it out in the classroom, or you can go to trainingthinktank.com/classroom trial to get a 7-day free trial. So let's start with the main question. Can CrossFit be used for sport performance? The simple answer is yes and no. So it really depends on how you define CrossFit. So just as a general exercise, let's say that CrossFit is first, general physical preparedness. Basically means that you're doing training to get your body ready for anything possible that could come out in life. So just by nature, if you use just CrossFit, GPP as your definition of what CrossFit training is, then it's not going to optimally prepare you for a sport. If you participate in a sport, there are very specific physical demands that you want to meet. So general training is probably not going to optimally prepare you for something specific. Another way that you could think about CrossFit is just through the class model. So a general CrossFit class, if you go to most affiliates, is going to be structured where there's some strength work, generally with a barbell on some sort of a weightlifting or powerlifting structure, and then there's going to be some form of conditioning. It could be intervals, or it could be a for time-based workout. So both of these would encompass what CrossFit is and how I'm going to answer the question. So the pros of what CrossFit as a training methodology or as a training community brings to the table is first, community and accountability. Most people, even athletes, are struggling when it comes to the development of physical capability in their ability to stick to a training plan and continue to get better. When you do something with a community of people, you're generally going to be held more accountable to get better and to continue to work on training in general. And just sticking to a plan for a period of time is more likely to develop you as an athlete. So participating in CrossFit for an athlete who might love their sport, but maybe not their strength and conditioning, the community and accountability aspect can really hold people into their training, which therefore improves physical performance, which therefore can improve their ability on game day, depending on the athlete. So we're going to get into some details and some specifics of different examples, but I'm just walking through some of the pros. Second would be intensity. Most people don't train hard, and CrossFit is one of the general physical training ideologies that's out there in the market that actually will push people into their respiratory systems getting to their limit, their heart rate having to get to the limit. Now, there are some sports where this might be applicable. For example, if you're a wrestler, doing that type of intense conditioning and getting your heart rate near max in somewhere between a 3 and a 20-minute workout could be optimal. If your sport is golf, that intensity might not necessarily be a pro. It might actually not drive any specific adaptations for you other than just making you a tough, more resilient human being who's accustomed to feeling poorly at specific times throughout the week. And the other pro is variation. So one of the pros of CrossFit's ideologies for general physical preparedness is that it's going to improve your general physical capabilities, balance, coordination, stamina, speed, some of the things that you would need to be a good athlete in any sport. Now, those are the pros. The cons are, if you're training for everything, so general physical preparedness, your skill refinement in any individual thing is probably going to be less of a priority to you. So your overall physical capabilities are going to get higher, but if your only measurement in your sport is this subset of needs you need right here, the specific skill refinement of the things that you would need to get better in that sport are going to be lower. If I use an example, field sport athlete, let's say jumping higher and running faster are 2 things that most field sport athletes are going to need. So training tools that might transfer to that would be, max height box jumps and power cleans as 2 movements. If you're on a general physical preparedness program and the program's trying to get you better for everything, you might not be doing plyometrics and power cleans on a regular basis in your training, which means that your skill of those 2 movements, your actual power clean technique work, your jumping and landing mechanics, and all the things that will allow you to express power at a higher level, that skill is not going to get trained as much. So if you are trying to get specific adaptations, then your skill refinement of whatever things in training are necessary for you to get better needs to be up. So a general CrossFit program could lack in its skill refinement for an athlete that's trying to get ready for a specific competition. Additionally, progressions are often lacking in most CrossFit programs. You have this variation concept, which is very good, again, for general physical preparedness. You want to be better at everything, so you got to do everything. And if you do everything, let's say you have 100 variables, you're going to get 1% better at each one of those 100 variables. But if you have 2 variables, that means you can get 50% better at those 2 variables. So your ability to get better at a lot of things goes down when you're doing variation, which means that you're not making that much progress on the specific things you want to get better at, which leads to specificity being the third con. Or really should say I'll put this in red, lack of specificity. So for example, if you are a golfer, you need a lot of rotational ability. You need the ability to walk on your feet for 4 to 6 hours and stay focused mentally. That's a completely different subset of adaptations for your body than somebody that's a 100-meter sprinter whose event is going to last somewhere between 10 and 13 seconds, depending on the level of athlete. And that lack of specificity means that the CrossFit program will be letting this athlete down. So for a professional athlete, I would just say, let's not even mince words and say a CrossFit program is probably not optimal for you if you're a professional athlete. If you are on a program that utilizes some of the components of CrossFit, it should probably be highly individualized and also matched up with your actual sport program. So your body can't tell the difference. If you're walking for 4 hours on a golf course and swinging a golf club, that's still physical exercise that gets tallied on your body. So that program of your actual skill work plus your physical training work should be merged together, and there should be communication with your skill coach and your actual coach. But we're not talking about professional athletes. We're talking about, let's say, high school athletes or recreational athletes or people that want to get better at maybe multiple sports. They play pickup basketball. They want to get better at basketball when they play with their friends, but they also want to get bigger, stronger, faster, leaner, and just improve their body composition. So these are the kind of athletes we're talking about, which means that I do think that you can find an optimal structure that allows you to integrate people into your classes, but give them a little bit more of the pros and cut out some of the cons that would be, can you give that athlete a CrossFit-based program? So let's look at an example workout. I took these workouts directly from CrossFit HQ's website and what their program was. I actually used 2 days because one of their training days was literally just back squat, 5 sets of 10. That as a session, if you warm up and you do some working set or warm up sets, getting to your working sets, I guess this could take somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes. But as a singular training session, I'd say it's probably a low volume amount of work. If you're trying to consider yourself an athlete, you probably need to be doing more than that. So I combined it with one of the next days in the training program, which was a 5 rounds for time, 3 power cleans at 225 and 155 for females, and a 60-yard shuttle sprint, which is 5, 10, and 15 yards down and back. So if you look at this training program, what I see when I look at it is, first, what is the rest time between these sets of 10? If I have somebody rest 30 seconds between those sets of 10, or I say sit down and rest 5 minutes to full recovery, then the loading parameters of this back squat become completely different. Now, in the CrossFit's program, they leave a lot of that arbitrary. So for beginners, they say just warm up and take your time and just work on technique. And then for athletes that are well-trained, maybe they'll do heavy sets of 10 and take longer breaks. And they kind of leave a lot of that specificity up to the individual to make their own decisions, which again, in my eyes, is that lack of specificity is a con if you're an athlete. If you're an athlete, there should be a very specific, purposeful intention of why are you doing these back squats. If it's to get stronger, then you probably want these to be heavier, which means you need your rest time to be longer. And if you're doing it to build conditioning base and, having your legs be able to work under tension for a long period of time while they're tired, then maybe driving my rest time down so that way I'm having to do sets of 10 while I'm tired and fatigued would be how I would manipulate that to be more specific. And then the 5 rounds for time workout, we have 225 and 155. These are very arbitrary weight selections. They happen in CrossFit very often. I think a lot of it is just based on 225 is 2 plates on a male bar, so it becomes, or 2 45-pound plates on a male bar, so it became a kind of staple of movements for power cleans, deadlifts, and a bunch of other movements in CrossFit. And then 155 is around 70%, which is generally the character or the loading change if you go from males to females in the sport. Now, when I look at that for an athlete, I think, well, this is super arbitrary. If I'm talking about an offensive lineman who weighs 300 pounds and can power clean 400 pounds, then this is somewhere around 60% of their 1 rep max, and that is not really super relevant. If I took this female weight and I say, okay, well, this is a female dancer who's 100 pounds, then this is 150% of their body weight and probably well over their 1 rep max because they're not necessarily training themselves to move a barbell under load. So having some level of specificity there and saying, okay, well, should this be a percentage of body weight? What's the intention of this session? Are you supposed to be able to move straight through it and sprint? Because if, let's say, somebody's max power clean is 245, then 225 is over 90%, and trying to turn that over repeatedly is going to be very difficult for them. So that's going to be a different stimulus-based workout than somebody whose max power clean is 400 pounds and who has a big conditioning base. So you have to kind of look at that as you're analyzing this workout to try to figure out, if I do have an athlete come into my gym that wants to use the CrossFit program for sport performance, for CrossFit, the goal of this is to just improve general fitness. So this specific workout happens to have some strength work and heavy capacity barbell work with mixed running. And this workout will take, let's say 5 minutes. So it's on the shorter end of the power spectrum where they're going to be working and pumping blood at a pretty high heart rate, and it'll be pretty intense for most people. So for scaling options, if somebody's coming in for just GPP, we could say, okay, well, I'm just going to lower this load to make sure that they could keep up with the people that can turn this over fast. But for an athlete, it's not about GPP. It's about specificity. So to illustrate this point, I'm going to use 2 different examples. I'm going to use a field sport and I'm going to use combat. I'm using those because those are most familiar to me. Those are the sports that I played growing up. So if I had a field sport athlete and this was my workout of the day at a CrossFit gym, and I had somebody coming in and they wanted to be a competitive high school football player, and they're coming into the evening classes, let's say it's in their off season, or they're just trying to be more accountable and take their fitness seriously so they can be bigger, stronger, and faster on the field. The workout would be 5 sets of 3, rest, RAN means rest as needed between. So we generally will want our football players bigger, stronger, and faster, and the duration of an average play in high school or college or the NFL is super short. It might be somewhere between 3 and 20 seconds. That would be a pretty long play. So if you know that, doing a set of 10, and if I do 2 seconds a rep, that is going to be about 20 seconds of work for the average person that's doing strength work. If you're breathing at the top of the set and just going on a 1 second down, explode up tempo, that means that you're working at a duration that is longer than most plays that these people would be experiencing. So cutting the number of reps that you do cuts the amount of time and makes it a little bit more specific relative to what they need to train for as a football player. Then, similarly, with the workout, I have 5 rounds for time, 3 power clean, 60-yard shuttle sprint. I changed this to 5 sets. So instead of being rounds for time, no football player is going to run for 5 continuous minutes. It might be very strange situations like a wide receiver in a hurry-up offense where you're getting close to the end of a game where they would need to be running continuously for a longer period of time. But most of the time, it's a very short play, reset, go to the sidelines, get a new play, come in, huddle, get back to the line. And there's always rest recovery built in, which is why you see football players as generally being bigger, more powerful, more explosive, because the demands of the sport tell you what you need to be optimal at that sport. So I changed this to be intervals, 5 sets, 3 power cleans, and instead of picking arbitrary weight, I picked a specific weight, 90% of their 1 rep max, so they should be able to turn it over for 3, but it should get probably heavier at the 2 and the 3 to actually be able to hit it. But my intention would be for them to be able to hit almost like a triple at 90% and then move into a 60-yard prowler push. So instead of being a shuttle sprint, it would be something loaded that they have to turn over while they're, down in more of a athletic stance than sprinting and change of direction. This might be for a lineman or maybe a linebacker, and then I might actually have kept the 60-yard shuttle sprint if this was a wide receiver that needs to work on running, cutting, accelerating out of cuts. But regardless, I'm resting to full recovery between these. I'm not doing it for time because it's not a GPP program. It is a sport performance program specific to a field sport athlete. Then I'm going to look at the same example. Let's say I have a combat athlete. So I have a wrestler that comes in. Instead of doing back squat, because generally most wrestling stances are going to be split stance, people are going to be leading with one leg, they're going to be a little bit lower. If you shoot and you actually do a penetration step, it's mimicking something like a lunge or a split squat. So instead of trying to train bilateral squat strength, I would train single leg squat strength. So it's the same movement, it's still a squat pattern, but instead of my lack of specificity, since I'm not gonna just be squatting on 2 legs on a wrestling mat, I'm gonna change them to split squats, 5 sets of 10 per side, and instead of just resting between, I'm gonna have them do 3 minutes of jump rope between sets. And it'll just be single unders or speed steps or varied footwork patterns. Essentially, if you want to be good at combat, you have to be strong, but also able to be strong while you're tired and working at a high heart rate. So it's kind of similar to the demands of a CrossFit style workout. But if you're just trying to improve your back squat, you're probably going to rest between sets. If you're trying to improve your leg strength while you're tired and fatigued, then you might want to have some sort of active recovery that makes them work on their feet in between sets instead of resting to recovery. Again, I'm trying to make it a little bit more specific to their sport. And then the workout, 5 sets, 6 sandbag cleans, because, generally holding onto a barbell that has a diameter that's something like this marker is not going to really give you the same adaptations as if I'm grabbing onto somebody's wrists or if I'm wrapping around somebody's body. The grips are completely different. So you'd want to still have some of the explosive strength, but make it more applicable to the sport. So 6 sandbag cleans, and then instead of doing a prowler push, because most combat athletes, they're not running. They might be in their boxing stance, bouncing back and forth, or they might be in a wrestling stance, moving forward 1 leg at a time with the back one following, changing direction. So instead of having them do a 60-yard shuttle sprint, I'm gonna have them do 20 seconds of varied shadow movement. So they might do shadow boxing, you might have a heavy bag and have them kick the heavy bag, you might have them do shadow wrestling, you could have them do sprawls, anything again that's relevant to their sport. Now, if you don't coach combat athletes, you wouldn't know what those things are, but this was really just to illustrate how you would make structural changes to a main CrossFit program to take it away from GPP and into sport performance. Now, this is my initial video on the can CrossFit be used for sport performance concept. What I did here was I gave you a specific workout that was very CrossFit, is exactly from main site. It's actually 2 workouts mixed into 1 session. And then I showed you how I would take those and change them into being more specific for sport performance. What I'll do in subsequent videos is give you how do I take the concepts and ideologies. So say, okay, if GPP is CrossFit's goal, let's say, how do I use the GPP model to figure out what are the variables that actually make sense to look at when I'm doing a sport needs analysis to figure out how I optimally strengthen, condition, train an athlete that's trying to get ready for something. And what you'll find as I go through the series is that training for an athlete getting ready for a sport is not really about them doing a GPP program or doing CrossFit. You can use some of the principles, you can use some of the movements. For example, if an athlete improves their ability to run and jump and power clean and do a weighted pull-up, some of those skills might transfer and make them way better at the sport. Or just sticking to a very difficult training program and getting through it could build confidence that gives somebody confidence on game day. But if you're writing a training program, it likely should be specific to that athlete. And in the next videos, we're gonna dive a little bit deeper into what those training programs look like, what themes from CrossFit we would take and apply to athletes, and which ones we would kind of brush under the rug and not use because they're not setting our athletes up for success.